Next In.
Hey, I'm Wes, and this is Next In. Today I have on Tiago Luchini, acting CTO at Odeko. Tiago, how are you today?
I'm great, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It looks like a beautiful day. Where are you at exactly?
I am in upstate New York, and for those of you watching, you can see my background. I decided to take my setup outside today. Such a beautiful day, so you see the woods in the back.
Yeah, no, it looks awesome. The sun's shining. If I open this curtain behind me here, it's just doom and gloom. I'm waiting on a storm to come through any moment. So that's incredible.
So you're hiding, from us, what the storm is going to look like.
Right. It's hopefully I can send it your way and get some of the sunshine my way. Well, man, I would love to kind of start by just where are you today and what does your company do? And then we could just take it from there.
Sure. So yeah, as I said, I'm upstate New York myself. My company today is in New York, headquartered in New York City. So I do commute every now and again, even though I work mostly remotely. I try to be there like once a week, sometimes twice a week. We have an office in Chinatown, so it's not too far and not too hard to actually get to. Professionally, I've been in the market for 26, 27. I stopped counting. When you stop counting after 10 years, 5, especially because in technology, every year feels like 10. So I feel like I have been in this industry for 200 years. Yeah. So nowadays I'm the CTO of Odeko. Odeko is a startup that has a very interesting story. So I don't want to actually, give a lot of it just too soon. But we started immediately before the pandemic. With a bit. Say again?
I said great timing.
Oh, and it was actually great for us because we were initially the whole idea was to build a predictive ordering system, basically to help small and medium businesses to order supplies, right? Like you never know when you're gonna need coffee beans or when you're gonna need paper cups or whatever, right? So we wrote this machine learning algorithm that would say, you know what, buy now because this is the best time for you to buy this kind of stuff. However, the pandemic hit, the whole industry became a gigantic mess. Data didn't make any sense anymore. The predictive algorithm that we wrote didn't work, and we needed to pivot, right? We found a way to pivot that worked amazingly well because we pivoted from this machine learning, very tech-focused business to a more logistic play. Because we realized that a big chunk of what the industry wants, specifically the coffee shop space, is they need suppliers, and it's a gigantic problem for them to build a supplier network, buy stuff, or organize their acquisitions, even receive, when they purchase stuff. In places like New York City, you have to receive supplies overnight. So that means actually hiring someone to stay in the shop, to open the shop for the delivery folks. So we basically decided to tackle the whole supply problem of one specific industry, which is the coffee shop space, at least in the beginning. And of course, we have aspirations to go way beyond that. But after 3 years of a company, now we are 450 people. We are in most states in the U.S. already. We are fully remote. I thought that I knew what hypergrowth was until I had to do this.
That's massive. So you're at over 400 people now. How many people were there when you started?
So the company was 50 when I joined, which was a little bit more than 12 months ago. It was 13 months ago. The whole company was 50. The engineering department was 13. Now engineering is 65, approaching 70 quite soon. And the whole company is 450. Of course, we have lots of drivers, warehouse people, like pick and packers. We have a very capital-intensive business as well on the warehouse front, on the supply front, right? So not all of this is admin and office folks, and even office folks. If you go to our office in Manhattan, is a tiny little space that sits maybe 10 people at the same time, and rarely some days we have 0 people there.
Nice. So 65 engineers,
mm-hmm.
And then you're also warehousing this stuff as well, and then delivering it yourself?
We do all the delivery. We want to be the Amazon in that space, right? Like, so we do the whole. It's purchase. So it's very Amazon-like experience. Of course, we are. Of course, well, that's actually a little bit weird, but we are behind a subscription wall. So if you go to our website, you're not going to be able to see the products we sell.
Right.
You need to be part of our network, if you will, right? Like you need to be authenticated into our network. So you are in the subscription wall. You log in, and then you see all the products that we sell. Very Amazon-like experience.
Yeah.
Of course, tailored for a coffee shop. So what it means in practice is that you can plan your orders based on standing orders as well. If you know you're going to need croissant Wednesday next week because you have a special event, you can order ahead of time so that you get fresh croissants next week, next Wednesday. So it's a standing order, as we say. So the whole ordering flow is a little bit different. And then we do all the way down, like from the warehouse, having our procurement stuff, filling our warehouses, pick and packing, putting on our trucks or our vans, delivering. We do in places like New York, and we're trying to roll that out in different places as well. We go as far as having the keys to the shop. So we open the shop, our driver opens the shop, loads the fridge, loads the shelves with the products that we are delivering, takes a picture, on our app that closes the whole loop so that you as a coffee shop owner, you get like, yeah, my fridge is loaded for tomorrow and I have exactly what I ordered. It is a very interesting experience, like which is obvious for tech folks, right? Like us as like technology, we're like, why don't we do something like this? But it's changing the whole environment. It's changing the whole industry, which is fascinating to me.
Well, you're talking about essentially being the Amazon for small, medium-sized businesses, and right now focused on coffee shops. Well, you got this kind of back and forth between Amazon and Walmart just now, last 6 months, started advertising that, hey, we'll deliver your groceries to your house. We'll have somebody come in, load your fridge, leave, right? Mm-hmm. And they provide all the features to know that they're not rummaging through my stuff and all that. And it sounds like you guys are already doing all of that as a startup.
We are, but for a very specific vertical, right? Like, of course, like what Walmart and Amazon are trying to do is very generic because they're delivering everything. You can buy a fridge, or you can buy just like a Band-Aid, right? Like on Amazon or Walmart. For us, we can be very efficient with the products that we carry because we know exactly what coffee shops need, right? Like, so we have been like really investing a lot in optimizing our procurement and optimizing our SKUs and which SKUs to have. We also have to deal with fresh stuff, right? Like I mentioned, croissant. That's a very interesting product because
got a shelf life.
They have absolutely no shelf life, right? Like you want fresh, right? Like when you are buying a croissant, you want it fresh. So the way we do that is we have this merchant platform. So we have bakeries that basically are merchants in our system, and they make their products available. So we basically place orders to them, right? Like, so we are basically connecting the ecosystem of supply, which is amazingly hard. Like and I'm very close to the industry. My wife is in this space as well. She works. She's a baker, and the industry is so inefficient. So simply by connecting supply and demand and having technology in the middle, we're not even doing anything like super fantastic in terms of like how complex this is. But just caring about that space is giving us a lot of a market. And you mentioned the pandemic and the timing. We wouldn't have found this market and this product market fit if it wasn't because of the pandemic. Or the pandemic really enabled us to actually find this.
That's awesome. Yeah, because I can definitely see how that's kind of a need that was there before, but was exacerbated by everything brought on by the pandemic.
Exactly, because like everyone was like, yeah, now I can't really pay for an extra person to open the store, right? Or I'm firing all my baristas and I'm the only person in the coffee shop because I own this place, right? Like, so I have to do everything now. So like just having a way to plan your orders for the week and not having to worry about it for the rest of the week, like saves you time, right? So we are really there. Like we care. My CEO and founder, he's Dane Atkinson. He's really in love with the idea of like helping small and medium businesses, right? So like this is a community. We're helping these folks. Like we want to make sure that this idyllic and small coffee shops still survive, especially when they are competing against Dunkin' Donuts and Starbucks and all these big brands. So we're trying to help that.
Well, I don't care at all to chime in and just tell you that locally owned coffee shops have way better coffee than Dunkin' and Starbucks. And I will argue with anyone who would say otherwise.
I'm biased. I'm a huge coffee guy. I
Yeah.
am a connoisseur. I like different beans, and I love the coffee shop experience particularly, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
I love mapping out all the small coffee shops and visiting them. Like I know every single coffee shop within 50-mile range of my house.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Because the business really interests me.
Yeah, I'm on a path to do the same thing in Nashville. So I got in a bad habit of I had 3 or 4 that I really liked, and those are the only ones I would go to. But I mean, there's probably 50 or 60 locally owned coffee shops. And it seems like the smaller the shop and the more off the beaten path, the better the coffee is.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah.
Me and a colleague that I work with are on the warpath to find as many as possible and to determine who has the best coffee in Nashville.
And it's amazing, right? Like when you find that small one that's very idyllic, sometimes hidden. There was this one in Brooklyn where I used to live that you wouldn't even know it was a coffee shop just by walking by. It was just like this tiny little door, and then you would enter, and it would be slightly big, right? Like for New York standards, and it was great. Like sometimes I would just work from there like the whole day and not care about life. It's the whole idea of having a third space, right? Like so, coffee shops are definitely special. Like even if you're not in the industry, like it's still special.
Yeah, 100%. Man, the best coffee I've ever had was in Peru. I was in a little town called Setipo. And I think part of the reason it was so good is honestly just because it was so fresh. I mean, it was literally grown and roasted right there in the town.
Oh, yeah.
And man, you can't touch that.
One of the coffee shops near where I live here in our upstate is fascinating because they have and now knowing the business, like I enter a coffee shop and I'm like, I know more or less how the business is structured, right? Like where they're making money, like how much space they have. So this space is like it's kind of big and it's always kind of empty as well. So I'm like, this is not really good utilization of space, right? Like you could be making more money per square feet on this thing. But on the other hand, they are also roasting their own coffee. So they have this tiny little room where they roast. So I think that's their whole business, right? Like even though they have a coffee shop and it's very elegant and nice, like people don't go there and sit. They just go and buy the coffee because it's fresh.
They're buying fresh. There's something like that here. It's called Raphael's. It's in our industrial park. And if you rode by, they don't even have like a bar where you can actually drink coffee there. But it's a small coffee roastery. And they just crank out and they ship locally, like in our region, and local roasted coffee.
And you know what's interesting? We put a little bit of a break on that at Odeko, but we used to have this weekly or every other week. We would invite one of our customers to give like this. We used to call like this customer series. Like they would actually come and talk to us and explain their problems and. Basically building this community, right? Like so that we understand who the customers are and what they are doing and their problems. And these folks, they really work hard. There are so many interesting problems that again, like for your listeners, right? Like, if you're interested in entrepreneurial ideas, just talk to people, because once you start talking to them and seeing like the kind of things they have to go through, you realize, oh, there's an opportunity to maximize and help in so many different areas, right? For instance, like one that we are interested, but I'm not sure we're going to be able to actually tackle is insurance, because if you are Starbucks, there is this corporate insurance that actually Starbucks buys. So it's much cheaper because the collateral for that kind of like insurance, that's Starbucks, right? So the amount per store is actually quite tiny, right? Like it's a fraction of what a normal person or a normal coffee owner would pay. Like it ends up being like
they're under a blanket liability policy.
Exactly. It's a
Yeah.
much better, like much better kind of negotiation and policy, right? If you're just like you have one coffee shop, two coffee shops, if you are like successful, you're gonna have to pay a lot more money, right? So there is definitely an opportunity, like in that space, to simply like help these companies
Yeah.
be part of a bigger liability, maybe part of a network or be part of a system, or we have been investigating the possibility, since we have drivers that go in and actually audit the space. Maybe that auditing also like helps reduce the liability as well, because we
Yeah,
can
that's
make sure
genius.
that we're checking whether their smoke sensors and whatnot are like active and etc. And then basically just like go through a checklist. Again, technically, and using technology, it's a simple app, basically like where you are, what's the store,
Yeah.
like a checklist, done, good, right? Like now your liability is much smaller, and we can actually retain 5% of that, 10% of that, and that's millions of dollars a year, right?
Yeah, I would say that there's a huge opportunity for that. So when I left the military, I started my civilian career selling small business insurance plans
Mm-hmm.
to coffee shop sized businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And if you could specialize in offering that to them, what you start
Mm-hmm.
to find is exactly what they need, because every small business has uniquely different needs. And then
Yeah.
you offer them this tailored package that you could offer the masses of locally owned
Yep.
coffee shops. Yeah, that's genius.
And then
That's
imagine, like in our case, since our current mode, strategically speaking, is the fact that we have that relationship with the coffee shops, right? Or we've been building that relationship with the coffee shops. I mentioned like wanting to be Amazon, but we're never going to be a whole household name. But we want to be a household name for those coffee shop owners,
for
right? Like
sure.
that they simply say like, oh yeah, just order it at Odeko, right? Like just Odeko this, like become a
Yeah.
verb at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's perfect. And you have the name for it. You could easily make that a verb.
Oh
That's
yeah,
perfect.
yeah.
That's perfect. So,
I don't know about it. It's a funny name.
um, let me ask you before we move on. I have to ask you, what is your favorite coffee in terms of like how do you like it? Are you
Ah.
steam milk or are you drinking it black? And if you're drinking it black, what's your favorite type of bean? Like Mexican Chiapas, Tanzania pea berry? Like what are we? How deep do you want to go here?
That is a good question. And I have a long answer because I keep shifting. I like exploring things and like more than anything else. At home, because I am jumping from meeting to meeting, from call to call. I just have espressos.
Yeah,
I brew my own espresso. Like I have two or three espresso machines like throughout the house, just like
2 or
different
3
types.
throughout the house.
I do.
That's awesome. That's
But that's because like I have the bigger one in the kitchen, and like I have a smaller one in the office, and I have a portable one that I actually use outdoors, which is my camping. So I actually have a espresso setup for when I'm camping.
that's awesome.
So espresso is a thing, right? But when I go to a coffee shop, I usually like ordering a cortado, because
Yeah,
cortado are kind of hard to do. Like if you are a good coffee shop, your cortado is going to be great. If you're just an average coffee shop, it's going to be below average. Like I can measure that quite
yeah.
quickly. And I mentioned like exploring. One of the things that I have been exploring myself is which is not coffee related, but like it is in coffee shops. But I'm transitioning to matcha, which is matcha tea, right? Like which is a
Okay.
weird one. But I've been trying more and more matchas in every single coffee shop or matcha shop that I actually find out there. We are also selling to those guys. We are also like a matcha vendor, and matcha is very interesting. Like I don't know if it's a New York thing, like because I haven't actually found a lot of it outside of New York just yet. But matcha is great.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. Man, I try to judge. I try to judge coffee shops off of their black coffee. So give
Uh
me
huh.
whatever's fresh with nothing in it, and then I make my determination.
And that's actually also good. But the problem is, like, for instance, I like espresso. If I order just espresso instead of just a black coffee, the American coffee, uh, like sometimes the difference between a one shot and two shot are
Yeah,
very big. Like if you order like a double espresso, like it's super super strong sometimes, which I like, but it's just like that one specific bean that they had.
yeah.
Anyway, like a very
Well,
at the end of the day, like if you like the space, sometimes just I go there even if it's not for the coffee, just to be in a coffee shop.
For sure. For sure. I do, like, sometimes even, I work hybrid. And so when I'm in our Nashville office, sometimes I'll literally just leave the office, take my laptop, and go do my work at a coffee shop just because I enjoy being there. Better than
I
sitting
am
under the fluorescent lights.
I am super spoiled, and I hope that my wife's boss doesn't hear this. But my wife works in a bakery that has a coffee shop attached to it, and
Nice.
it's only 6 miles from here. So like sometimes I go there and I work from there during the whole day, and I have free coffee throughout the day.
Yes, that's perfect. That's perfect. So let's transition a little bit and
Sure.
back to technology. How
Mhm.
did you get into technology? Like,
Oh
where did it
boy.
start for you?
So for me, and giving a little bit of background, so I am Brazilian. I was born in Brazil, São Paulo, more specifically. Like if people know the geography there, São Paulo is like the New York of
Okay.
Brazil, like very Italian. That's why my surname is Italian as well. And I was born in the late 70s, and between the 70s and the 80s, the Brazilian economy was very closed, especially in the technology space. They had this whole idea that they had to develop their own things, like very
Right.
locally. So everything that I saw as a kid doesn't really connect with anything else, that Americans had or Europeans, because it was all either things that they would actually import somehow and then assemble in Brazil and actually give a completely different name, completely different software, even completely different languages, right? Like, so for
Wow.
instance, one of the languages that I learned was a version of Fortran that was translated into Brazilian Portuguese just
Wow.
because.
Wow.
Right, like it was just like, yeah, like let's do this because that's what the market wants, or the what the government wants. But I was very young. I was 12 years old. Got my first, like, one of those computers that you plug into the TV, that you have like a cassette, a cassette player on the
Yeah.
side, like, to record stuff. And myself and a couple of friends, we started writing our own games, and we would make competitions. Like I would write a game that they had to beat, and vice versa. And then we started actually pair programming, in a way, or mob programming, with like a bunch of us would go to like one of the guys' houses and just like code as much as possible, and then try to hack and copy stuff. So when we were around 13, 14, we had already hacked a lot of things. And it was exactly when also Brazil as an economy and government basically transitioned and opened
Oh,
for important technology. And then it was a wash, because then, like, we were buying computers left and right, and like trying to get as much money as we could, even selling services. So that's why I usually tell people, or try to explain, that I started working when I was 12, but it was because I wanted to buy parts for my PC,
yeah. That's
or to upgrade the PC that I was buying, right? Like, so I would actually code for money, and then use that money to buy the next sound card, or the next video card, or whatever, right? And
Yeah.
uh, so I've been doing this for 30 plus years then.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So what was your first? So that's as a kid building computers, coding, kind of learning on your own. What was your first real entry into? Man, this is my career. Like, I'm here doing this for the next 20, 30 years.
So there was I think that the point where I realized that I really liked it was I was still young. I think it was like between 13 and 14. And one of the systems that I sold, because I remember very distinctively, like two of the systems that I sold, I used to sell like smaller things, but then one of the systems that I sold was for an accounting firm. So these guys were like, official accounting, right? They were writing
Yeah.
the books, the ledgers, and whatnot, right? And I had to learn, like, how accounting works, like how debts and credits and assets and liabilities and whatnot, and like in all these appropriations and yields and etc. So I had to learn a lot when I was like 13, 14. I would actually get like my client gave me one of those HP, those financial calculators, so that I could actually learn how to do like
Yeah.
return rates and whatnot, and like understand and even cross check with what I was doing. Uh, and more than that, was a lot of learning way over my head as a young teenager, right? But what I realized was like, oh, these things that I can actually do with a computer really matter, like, can really be used
Right.
by someone, right? Like, that office, that accounting office, used the tiny little application I wrote for like 7 years, right? Way into my 20s.
Wow, that's
Which is
cool.
just, I was not even maintaining it anymore. But like, but that feeling of, yeah, here's like an adult, right? Like, at the time, like, my client had like a 30, almost 40 years old, and here's a guy who has an office, he has a business, and he needs my help, and I know how to help, right? And I can
Right.
build something that, and for me, that was, and it's a big thing in my career as a whole. This whole feeling that, I'm doing something or building something that I know people are using. I know it's helping people. I know it's cliche when people say like, "Oh, making the world a better place" or whatever. For me, it's a lot more about like, yeah, this is, it's in someone's life, right? Like, it's in
Yeah.
someone's daily life, or in someone's, like, at a specific point in time.
Yeah, even to today, right? I mean, at Odeko, like you're making that's a pretty big impact on a small business owner who already has a ton of
It
stuff to
is.
deal with.
Yeah, and to some extent, and then of course nowadays, of course, I'm an adult now, right? Like, and I can philosophize a little bit more, and then go beyond that and say like, I'm making the life of consumers as well as a little bit better,
Right,
right? Because like, if you have a coffee shop, and you are not actually worried about your supply chain anymore, you're treating people
right.
better. It's like there's this whole chain effect. Uh, but some of my career highlights in terms of, being proud of what I coded, have always been in seeing the numbers. So like, when I
Yeah,
like delivering something and saying like, oh my god, really? Do we have 77 million people using this? Right? Like,
that's cool.
did I test that code?
Yeah, that's awesome.
But like, did that work?
Yeah, that's awesome. The only thing I've ever built's my house, and there's 3 kids that use it, so that's the most. That's
And
it.
but actually, they are the most important users, right?
They're very thankful end users. Um, Man, so what is that kind of career highlight when you look back? You talk about, building something, there's millions of people using it, having that kind of moment of like, wow, this is cool. When you look back over your career, what are you like, yeah, that was the one? Like, is there one kind of shining or multiple?
There are multiple, but I'm gonna choose one that, I really felt everything was going right, right? Like, and so this deserves a little bit of explanation. Uh, and it's also very situational. That's when I moved to the U.S. It was my first project in the U.S., and that was with, Virgin America. Virgin America doesn't even exist anymore. They were acquired by, Alaska Airlines.
Yeah,
But back then, Virgin America, like, if you have you ever flown, Virgin America, like they were
I
very
haven't.
fancy. They were like the cool kids, right? Like, the
Okay.
plane had like all these weird lights, and they're
I'm a Southwest. What's the cheapest ticket you got? Kind of. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and also like, you were also in Nashville, which doesn't have like, they were flying a lot, East Coast, West Coast, right? Like, that's why, like, the cool kids, right? Like,
right.
connecting the money with, technology and whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely.
There was a lot of branding involved, and, but amazing team. Like, I really liked. And that's actually the very first part. Like, the first I was, moving to the US, my first client. Those guys were really unique as a client, and they really allowed us. We were basically rebuilding the website and the whole, e-commerce experience, like, booking a flight,
Right.
canceling, changing, like, the whole experience that you have normally with an airline. Um, but because they were very different, they were really open to listening to crazy ideas that we had, right? So, and I was also, partnering. Like, my team was superb. Was definitely the best group of people that ever worked together, not only in technology but also in design, in product, ideation, marketing. Like, everyone was great in that team. There was like not even a single weak link. Um, uh, and because we were giving all these crazy ideas, and the client was like, yeah, let's try that, let's see where it takes us, right? We were able to not only build something fantastic, in a very short period of time. Was like, within budget, within the time that we had, like all
Right.
those things that are already very difficult, but we changed a bunch of things in the industry, like moving forward. So even just today, like, earlier today, someone sent me a screenshot of a, boarding pass that this person just got. Like, this person had like a boarding pass from last month from a certain airline, and a boarding pass from this month, and the boarding pass that this person had, looked as modern as our boarding pass 10 years ago when we actually wrote this for
Oh,
Virgin America, right? Because it became a case. Back then I would talk to people, from Google and Facebook, and they were like, "Oh yeah, we know your case. Like, we know the things
well,
you're
that's
trying to
cool.
do." But basically, what we were trying to do, like to be like make a long story short, we were simply being reasonable, right? Like we were saying things like, why do you have so many ads on your page when people are coming here just to book a flight, right? So why in your homepage should be a booking experience, right? Like it shouldn't,
Right.
like if you have like a gazillion different ads, it's basically the marketing department that is driving the content of this page.
Yeah.
And
That's
does that really drive engagement? Does that really drive sales? And then when we check the numbers, we're like, no, it doesn't, right? So, or we're like, can we test it out? Can we A/B test this and remove all the ads and make just a booking experience, like starting from the top? And then we would actually see sales going up, right? So we were like really trying to break convention, right? Same thing with the boarding pass. Like, why does the boarding pass has to be so ugly and so full of data? Can't we just like really highlight the most important things and make it
right.
like beautiful, right? Like, and
Where am I
simple.
going? Where am I sitting?
And what is the gate, right? Like,
Yeah.
what time
Yeah.
does it have to be? Where? Like, but it's basically like 4 or 5 bits of
Right.
information that you can actually use iconography, right? Why do you need like 15 different barcode? And the fun thing is, like, as soon as we started exploring, because we thought it was like a legal requirement, like we're like, well, maybe there is like a body from the
The
government body that
government. We
actually,
have to make them complicated.
and actually it's not, it's just like
Yeah.
convention. They have been doing that since the 60s, and it's a thing. Like, they didn't really think about changing. And
Right.
then we just decided, we literally to test it out, we printed a boarding pass, we built a Photoshop file simulating a boarding pass, completely different, right? Like looking the way we wanted, with pictures
Yeah.
and color and whatnot. And then one of my partners tried to board a plane with that, and he was able to. Like, no one actually bothered him.
Nice.
And we're like, yep, let's do this. Like, no one cares.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So it
That's
was,
awesome.
back to your question about like no, being the highlight. I think the highlight is it wasn't the biggest amount of users in my career. It wasn't the most profitable kind of like project, but I
Right.
think like having all these pieces, and there's like industry changing patterns, and then really being enabled by clients as well to just explore different alternatives,
Right.
it made that project really special.
Yeah. No, that's really cool. Have you ever seen Catch Me If You Can?
Catch me if you can. Yep.
He would
Yep.
have appreciated a simplified boarding pass. For sure.
So I'll tell you a story that that is also hilarious, because like during this time, of course, and I ended up actually working in a couple of other airlines after this one, because this became a big case. We ended up making money with other airlines later. But throughout this whole airline phase of my life, I was always flying what they call blank space, which is like you fly for free, right? Like
Yeah,
I know
it's a
you're
jump
just
seat.
like in, yeah.
Yeah.
And then because I was flying almost weekly, sometimes multiple times a week, I got really lazy to get to the airport early and go through the security and the whole thing. So what I started doing was like just like waving my badge. Like the
Yeah.
badge usually had like the colors, and like and at least the colors of the brand that I was actually with, right? Like in this case, Virgin America. So I would actually just wave it. And actually just go through security, right? Like, of course,
Yeah.
it's still security, but like it's the fast one, like the crew member one, right?
Sure.
So we'd
Sure.
actually enter with the crew guys, right? Uh, I knew, because I had noticed, I had checked my badge, and like my badge had nothing on it. It was just like a generic badge with my picture, my name, and the colors of Virgin America. There was not even Virgin America written on it,
That's awesome.
because I'm not employed by Virgin America. I was just a contractor, right?
And they were
And
just like, yeah, go ahead.
they're like, yeah, no, you're waving a badge and you are so confident. It's fine.
That's
You think
awesome.
like yeah, you look like you know what you're doing. So like, come in.
Yeah, that's hilarious. That is how a younger me, I'm not proud of this, but that's how a much younger me used to get into bars.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is
But the interesting thing, like, just wrap that story up, is because like I used to do that. That's fine. And then one of my partners saw me doing that, and he started doing that as well. So like, oh, that's genius, right? But he had never noticed that the badge had no no indication whatsoever. So and the day that I told him, I was like, well, that we are just like using our confidence, right? Like that there is no badge involved in this
This
process.
means
Then
nothing.
he was not able to do that anymore after that.
That's awesome. Oh, that's good. Yeah, and confidence goes a long way, man.
Yep.
It goes a long way because the security guys are like, oh, he's supposed to be here. Clearly, he's
Yeah.
clearly that's yeah.
Of course, it is kind of scary, right? Like, if you start abusing, especially like I don't like abusing my luck, not only because of me, but because like I don't want to see how far this can go.
Right, right. That's awesome. I'm probably not. Well, my wife and I are headed to Mexico next month. I don't think I'm going to try that, but it's tempting.
No, especially if you have your family, like you shouldn't.
No,
Are you flying Air Mexico?
no, Southwest, man, Southwest.
Southwest?
Yeah,
Okay, yeah.
Nashville to Cancun. Nashville started doing direct flights to Cancun
Okay.
last year. So
Okay,
yeah.
that's good because that's convenient. Yeah, Air Mexico was one of the when you are in Mexico City, we did their apps and also their kiosks. So the whole airport is full of
Okay.
kiosks. Like it's one of the projects we did as well.
Oh,
A
nice.
lot of fun.
Very cool. Very cool. So where did you go from there? So you left the
Oh yeah.
airlines.
So this was like when I came to the US. I came to the US to start a kind of a new type of agency. So I merged with a couple of friends. They had experience in the marketing agency space here in New York. That's actually quite strong. Back in the early days of the internet, all these marketing agencies needed to become digital agencies, right? So those guys were luminaires of that space. They had already sold at least one company in that space, and they were looking for the next big thing. And our idea was to create some kind of like digital agency, right? Like digital product agency, not only digital in terms of building websites and really porting print to the web, but really looking at web and mobile as the way we see them today, right? Which is we are interacting with a whole product. So we would actually engage with brands like Virgin America, Apple, YouTube, and say this thing that you put on people's hands is your whole product, right? How can we design this product better? How can we make this product more efficient? How can we build this product more efficient? How can we improve the conversion rates or whatever it is that you're trying to do, right? So we were selling to several different brands. Our first client was Virgin America. But boy, we sold to projects to Google, Facebook, YouTube, like Twitter, kind of like West Coast, all the cool kids. But we also had T-Mobile, MasterCard, American Express. We had a bunch of more traditional folks as well, with the older kids in a way. And that was the whole package of those almost 10 years, doing the agency work, as I said. And I decided to quit, that space and executed an exit in my position when we kind of closed the loop a little bit, because we started this idea trying to copy Apple, or the whole idea that Apple has. Apple is great on strategy. They are amazing on design, and they are also amazing on technology, right? So it's kind of like the three-legged stool that they have. So we designed our agency around those three legs as well, and we were selling that as a service. That was our initial idea, right? But then we closed a full circle 10 years later, because we were selling back to Apple and building products for Apple using Apple's Apple in a box kind of process, right? And I was like, great, after almost 10 years doing this, I'm done. Let me take a little bit of a sabbatical, and that's the journey I have been since then. I decided to go back into the startup space, having more ownership of my products instead of building products for others, basically.
Yeah, they're very cool. So when you look back over your career, what do you think has been instrumental in your growth to help you continue that career trajectory upward?
Instrumental in my growth. Oh God, so many different things. But I think, okay, that's going to be interesting, because in the tech space, we often think, and I used to think that way as well, that the stuff you do with a computer is actually what really matters, the lines of code, right? Or the technologies choices that you make, whether you're going to use language A or B or C or whatever it is, right? And the the more years I spend in the industry, the more I realize that everything is pointless, right? Like, in terms of like whatever decision you made is probably gonna expire at some point, or like, things are gonna actually look different as the context changes or the industry changes. A language I would choose 20 years ago, I would never choose today, and things like this, right? And even code, right? Like, you write a piece of code, if that code runs for 7 years, or 7 years is a miracle, right? Because like most probably it's going to actually be retired, and like it's going to be upgraded and moved to like a newer version of whatever it is that that product does. So my bottom line is like in the beginning of my career, I thought that the hard stuff was actually what really mattered, and actually what really matters is relationships and what people call soft skills, which is kind of hard, right? Like to pinpoint, but like it is about communication, it is about relationships, it is about um, uh, conflict resolution, it is about the friends you make along the way, right? I hate the whole idea of like boss, employee, supervisor, or like using those words. Like I'm always surrounded by friends, right? Like I like the people that I work with. I'm spending more time with them than I'm spending with my family, so I should at least like them. And vice versa, right? So like, how do I make myself likable, right? Like which in many stages in my career I didn't care, right? Like I was like only this machine, coding, building, moving, leading people, giving orders.
Right.
And nowadays I'm like, no, you know what, like people might just being confused or by what I'm doing, or they might not really be in the same page that I am in terms of like vision, or I'm failing on the communication side, right? Like so yeah, to answer your question, like the human side is a big thing in the kind of stuff that we do.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I see with engineers specifically is, they kind of hit that fork in the road about 15 years into a career where it's like, I'm either going to stay, like you're saying, just a hardcore technologist coding and become that principal level developer, and then that's really kind of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm going to develop my people skills and develop my communication ability, and your career can actually advance much further, right?
And the one thing that like people, and you're totally right, but that should not be an excuse to say like as soon as you become like you hone your people skills, that you have to become a manager, or that you have to become like an engineer manager and like engineer director. What I usually say, like even to people that want to get really technical, is like as soon as you get to that level of like you are one of the experts, right, of the company or the market, whatever it is, you need to start listening to people. Like of course you needed to listen to people before as well, right? But
Right.
now it's even more important, because like now people are listening to you, right? Like and you need to make sure that you're communicating properly. You need to make sure that your decisions like make sense in a much bigger scheme of things. So even if you still want to be like a hardcore, really deep into a stack technology framework, or architecture, whatever it is, your people skills are still important, right? Like, so as soon as you get to that staff level, principal level, even if you are, the best TypeScript person in the universe, right? Like, actually, to be the best TypeScript person in the universe, you also need to be out there giving talks and being in
Right.
conferences and smiling to people, right? Because like otherwise they're not going to use your framework or whatever it is, right? And you need to do community management, or you're going to need to actually have someone helping you doing community management, depending on like where you are. So there's a lot of things that are like happens like even if you're like purely technical.
Yeah, that's good. So we talked about this before the podcast started, but when you look back on things you've read that have kind of helped shape you in your career, what books stand out to you the most?
One of the books that is very technical, but really helped me was SCICP, the structured. What is the full name of it? SCICP. Oh, I forgot the name of the book. SC. I know we talked about this because okay, let me talk about the human one first. So, because this is a technical one, like really foundational. The other one is a little bit more recent, but I had to read it a couple of times. and I have even multiple copies because every single time I was reading, I was marking and like highlighting stuff. Is a book called Team Topologies. Have you heard about that one?
I
Oh, you
haven't.
haven't? Okay.
Team
So
typologies.
team topologies, as in
Okay.
network topologies, right? Like, but it's
Okay.
a team topology idea. It's a very small, very short book, but very dense in the sense that like every single paragraph is like very rich, right? But
Cool.
basically, this is a bunch of guys that came from the DevOps revolution space, like those guys basically driving and analyzing the DevOps space, and they noticed certain patterns in DevOps teams that could be used by bigger organizations, right? Like that could be used by really looking at organizations as a system. And I love this idea of social technological challenges, right? Like that what you build is a result of the people that you have and where you put them and how you organize them.
Right.
So this guy is basically decomposed how those teams, how you can actually design teams and organize teams in a way that you achieve the objectives you want, right? So that's very it might be a difficult book to read if you're like early in your career, but it's a very important book to be reading like constantly, and then realizing that those patterns, like a little bit like reading the mythical man month, right? Like from Fred Brooks, that every single time you read, you're like, oh my god, like this guy was a genius, right? Like he was ahead of his time. Team Topologies, in my opinion, is the current mythical man month right now.
Okay. Very cool. I'm gonna have to look into that. Last question for you, and then we'll wrap up. If you could talk to someone who was 10 to 15 years behind you in their career, what advice would you give that person?
10 to 15 years behind me. Let me think. I'm going to repeat a little bit. Like, I think that this human thing is very important, but I'm going to be like a little bit more specific, right? Like, I think that we as engineers, and it's okay to be opinionated, right? Like I'm opinionated myself. Like there are certain things that I like more than other things in technology, languages I like more, frameworks I like more. That's healthy, right? Like, but the problem is when you are in the space and you are not really getting buy-in from people, right? Like, so if I would actually roll back and just see myself 15 years ago, 10 years ago, I think that I stunned my career for easily 2 to 5 years, simply because I was trying to be a little bit too aggressive in a couple of fronts that were obvious to me, but were not obvious to anyone else, right? So invest in soft skills, but don't do that to become a manager. Like, do that because like you want your point to be heard, you want to be able to influence people, you want to have friendships along the way, right? Like you don't want enemies along the way, right? Like you want friends along the way. And I think that like every now and again, because we get so opinionated, there is a lot of us versus them and a lot of stress in companies. And nowadays I actually manage really trying to remove negativity as much as possible. Just as an example, when I joined Odeko last year, there was a lot of baggage in terms of early startup. Lots of monoliths had been built, companies had been acquired, nothing was working, right? Like, and there was like that negative weight on our shoulders. So we would put architects together, and they would always say about things that didn't work. We're like, oh yeah, we can't do this because of that, or yeah, that's bad. And it was kind of like self-reproducing, right? Like we would actually put in the room and like one person would complain, the next person would complain. And I see that in a lot of technical teams, right? And nowadays I manage, and I think that like if I could actually have done that 10 years earlier or 15 years earlier, I manage with positivity. I manage with like, great guys, it sucks. We all agree. What do we have to do to stop making it suck? Right? Like, if we can do like one tiny thing today, what would that tiny thing be? Right? Like, and then we change the conversation altogether, and then we do that tiny thing, right? So, but you can only do that if you have rapport with people, if you know how to read the sentiment and feelings. So that's why, basically I'm saying get better soft skills. But I hate this idea of like, getting better in your soft skills just because you want a better job, or you want to become
just
a
for
manager.
self-promotion.
It's just for self-promotion.
Right.
It's not, right? Like, you want to become better in your soft skills, because that helps everything, right? Like, that helps so many other areas. Like, my life was so much better, even in my personal life, after I got better in some of these areas.
Yeah. Soft skills will help you in literally every area of your life, from family to professional relationships, and it helps those you're communicating with, right?
Exactly. Because then, I could use lots and lots of examples like that with my personal life and wife and family, where like, now I know what to do, right? Because I have the skills to have, to keep myself centered, and to drive the conversation whatever I want, and not because I want this, but because I want to help more. Like, it's not about me, it's about the others.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can tell you, man, I still got room for improvement, but the biggest teacher to me for my soft skills has been my marriage.
Yeah. For sure. But actually, that's another important thing. Like, right, like, we're always the same way that, like, technically I don't think that I can ever say, oh, I know technology X, right? Like, and if I ever hear that from any engineers, I'm like, oh yeah, I know everything about this thing. I don't like that person anymore. I don't agree with that person anymore.
Immediately suspicious, because no one knows everything about anything, really.
And that's a lesson in humility, right? Like, actually, that's a very good example. I worked in one of my teams. I worked with the guy who wrote one of the key books for Clojure in the Clojure community. Like, he wrote one of the. There are not many books, there are like 6 or 5 books, and he wrote one of the key ones, right? So when I was like, oh, here, like, Chowser, that's amazing. I didn't know you were in the team. Like, I read your book. Like, that's amazing. So I was a fan immediately, right? Like, even though, like, he was reporting to me, but I was a fan. And one of the things that I learned immediately, pair programming with him, like, how humble that guy was, right? Like, he literally not only wrote the book, but like, if you go to the code base of the language, he wrote big chunks of the language, right? Like, this is the level of guy. And he didn't really project that idea of like, I know it all, like, I'm an expert in this language. Actually, it was quite the contrary. Like, pair programming with him was delightful, because we would be exploring ideas and evolving, and like, it was one of the best pair programming experiences I've ever had, right? Like,
that's cool,
with a guy that was nowhere near what I thought he would be, right? Like, and that teached me a lot.
Like, if ever there was someone in your path who could say, yeah, I know everything about this, it would have been him, and he didn't, right?
Exactly. That's my point, right? Like, no, that's a guy I would expect. If he said, it was the only guy that I expected to say, I know everything, and he didn't at all. Quite the contrary. Like, we had amazing conversations that were very experimental, that he really projected that humility, which was very very genuine, right? Like, he was not lying or anything. He was like, yeah, like, I don't know. And he was also very critical. Like, he would actually pinpoint to some of the areas of the language that he coded himself, and he would be the first one to say, like, oh yeah, this really doesn't work the way that I would want today. But now people use it this way, so what can I do?
That's perfect. I think that's a great place to leave it, right? So work on your soft skills, stay humble, and you'll advance in your career.
Yeah, and Wes, thank you very much for the opportunity to share a little bit of my life.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a joy. I think I could go another hour, but
me too. That's why I'm stopping here as well.
Yeah. So yeah, it's been great. We'll leave it right there.
Nxt In.